There's something happening in the quantum field right now that only 0.1% of people will ever witness directly. You're seeing this transmission because your consciousness has achieved a level of coherence that most humans never reach in their entire lifetime. What I'm about to reveal will sound impossible to anyone operating from ordinary reality, but to you, it will feel like coming home to a truth you've always known but couldn't quite access until this moment. The final level has been cleared. The dimensional barriers that have kept you locked in repetitive patterns are dissolving, and in the next 30 minutes, you're going to understand exactly how to step through the portal that's opening for you right now. Most people spend their lives believing they're stuck in one timeline, one version of reality, powerless to change their fundamental circumstances. But quantum physics has proven what mystics have known for millennia. Reality isn't fixed. It's a flowing field of infinite possibilities, and consciousness is the force that determines which possibility becomes your lived experience. You are not trapped in the timeline you've been experiencing. You never were. What you've been calling your life is actually just one thread in an infinite tapestry of potential realities, all existing simultaneously in the quantum field, all equally real, all equally available to your consciousness. The reason your desires have felt so distant, so impossible to achieve, is not because they don't exist. It's because they exist in a parallel timeline that your consciousness hasn't learned to access yet. But something extraordinary is happening in this exact moment. The electromagnetic frequencies of Earth itself are shifting, creating windows of opportunity that haven't existed for thousands of years. These frequency shifts are making timeline jumping not just possible, but inevitable for those who understand how to align their consciousness with the quantum mechanics of reality creation. You're not just manifesting things within your current timeline anymore. You're being prepared to shift into an entirely different version of reality where your dreams aren't goals to achieve. They're simply the natural state of existence. Think about this carefully. Every night when you dream, you experience multiple realities as if they're completely real. In one dream, you might be flying. In another, you're having conversations with people who don't exist in your waking life. In another, you're living in a completely different time period or location. Your consciousness has no problem accepting these alternate realities while you're experiencing them. Timeline jumping is simply learning to do consciously what you already do unconsciously every time you sleep. The only difference is that instead of random dream realities, you're choosing which timeline to experience based on your deepest desires and highest possibilities. But here's where it gets fascinating from a quantum perspective. Recent discoveries in quantum mechanics have revealed that what we call the past isn't actually fixed. It's constantly being rewritten by present-moment consciousness choices. Every decision you make in this moment literally rewrites your history, creating new causal chains that lead to this present moment. This means that when you shift timelines, you don't just change your future, you change your past. You shift into a reality where you always had the resources, opportunities, and support systems necessary for your desires to manifest naturally. Your memories adjust to match the new timeline, creating coherence between your history and your present reality. This isn't science fiction. This is cutting-edge quantum mechanics meeting ancient consciousness technologies. Physicists call it the quantum Zeno effect and the Wheeler delayed choice experiment. Mystics call it rewriting your soul's contract with reality. If this quantum understanding is creating shifts in how you perceive reality, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to stay connected with this frequency of consciousness exploration. Your engagement helps more people discover these transmissions exactly when they need them most. The timeline you're about to access contains versions of every person in your life who are aligned with your highest good. Relationships that have been sources of conflict or limitation in your current timeline exist in harmony and support in your new timeline. Financial struggles don't exist because you shift into a reality where abundance has always been your natural state. Health challenges disappear because you access a timeline where your body has always functioned optimally. You're not healing problems or manifesting solutions. You're stepping into a reality where those problems never existed in the first place. This is why traditional manifestation methods can feel so slow and difficult. They're trying to change conditions within your current timeline, instead of shifting you into a timeline where your desired conditions are already the established reality. The process requires understanding what quantum physicists call timeline coherence. Every timeline has a specific vibrational signature, a unique electromagnetic frequency that determines which version of reality you experience. Most people are unconsciously locked into the frequency of their current timeline through habitual thought patterns, emotional reactions, and identity structures. But consciousness has the ability to consciously shift frequencies and therefore shift timelines. This isn't metaphor. This is measurable science. Your brain waves, your heart rhythm, your cellular oscillations all change when you align with a different timeline frequency. Advanced biofeedback equipment can actually measure these shifts in real time. Your current timeline is maintained by what scientists call strange attractors, patterns of energy that keep your consciousness locked into repetitive cycles. These attractors were created by past traumas, limiting beliefs, and social conditioning that convinced you certain realities were impossible for someone like you. But strange attractors aren't permanent features of your consciousness. They're just patterns of energy that can be dissolved and replaced with new attractors that pull your consciousness toward timelines aligned with your highest possibilities. Let me share the exact mechanism that makes timeline shifting possible. In quantum field theory, there's a phenomenon called quantum superposition, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed. Your consciousness exists in quantum superposition right now, simultaneously connected to every possible timeline that could contain your awareness. Most people unconsciously collapse this superposition into the same limited timeline over and over again through repetitive observation patterns. They look for evidence of lack, so they collapse into timelines containing lack. They expect struggle, so they collapse into timelines where struggle is necessary. They identify as someone with limitations, so they collapse into timelines where those limitations are real. But when you understand how to consciously direct your observation, you can collapse quantum superposition into any timeline you choose. This is the true secret of manifestation. You're not creating new realities. You're choosing which already existing reality to experience. The key is learning to observe from the identity frequency of your desired timeline rather than from the identity frequency of your current timeline. This requires what I call identity displacement, where you temporarily suspend your current self-concept and embody the self-concept that exists in your desired timeline. Take a moment right now and comment below with this exact phrase: I choose the timeline where everything flows. Don't just type it mechanically. Feel yourself making a quantum choice. Feel your consciousness reaching across dimensional boundaries to touch the reality where these words are already true for you. This is your signal to the quantum field that you're ready to make the shift. Most people's timeline shifting attempts fail because they try to shift from a place of wanting or needing. Want and need are frequencies that belong to timelines of limitation. You cannot access unlimited timelines from limited frequencies. This is why the final preparation for timeline shifting requires what I call quantum detachment. Quantum detachment isn't about not caring about your desires. It's about releasing attachment to your current timeline's version of how those desires must manifest. In your current timeline, your dream house might seem impossible because of financial limitations. But in your new timeline, that house might come to you through an inheritance, a business opportunity, or a chain of synchronicities that your current timeline mind could never imagine. When you release attachment to the specific mechanisms of manifestation, you allow the quantum field to deliver your desires through whatever timeline offers the path of least resistance and greatest joy. Here's where timeline shifting becomes a spiritual practice rather than just a manifestation technique. Each timeline contains not just different circumstances, but different versions of your soul's expression. Your current timeline has only allowed you to express certain aspects of your infinite nature. Your new timeline will activate soul potentials that have been dormant in your current reality. You may discover artistic abilities you didn't know you had. You may find yourself naturally attractive to opportunities that never appeared in your current timeline. You may develop intuitive capacities that seem almost magical from your current perspective. These aren't new abilities you're developing. They're existing abilities that are natural to the version of you that lives in your new timeline. The reason this feels so extraordinary is because you're not just changing your external circumstances. You're accessing more of who you actually are. Timeline shifting is ultimately about coming home to your full potential, your complete self, the version of you that isn't limited by the beliefs and patterns that created your current timeline. But here's what makes this moment in history so unprecedented. The electromagnetic field of Earth itself is undergoing what scientists call a magnetic pole shift. This planetary frequency change is creating what quantum physicists call a global phase transition, where the basic operating system of reality is upgrading to support higher levels of consciousness. This means that timeline shifts that would have taken years or decades in previous eras can now happen in weeks or months. The dimensional membranes between parallel realities are becoming increasingly permeable. What used to require advanced shamanic training or years of meditation practice is now becoming accessible to anyone with sufficient quantum coherence. If you're resonating with this transmission, if something inside you is recognizing the truth of these possibilities, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency of reality creation. Click that subscribe button as a quantum commitment to operating from timeline awareness rather than linear limitation. The process of timeline shifting happens in 3 distinct phases. The first phase is quantum sensing, where you learn to feel into the electromagnetic signature of different timelines. This isn't intellectual visualization. This is developing actual sensory awareness of alternate reality frequencies. Close your eyes for a moment and feel into the energy of your current timeline. Notice how it feels in your body. What's the emotional tone? What's the energy level? What's the sense of possibility or limitation? Now imagine reaching your consciousness toward a timeline where your primary desire has already manifested naturally. Can you sense a different quality of energy? A different electromagnetic signature? This is quantum sensing. You're developing the ability to consciously perceive different timeline frequencies. The more you practice this sensing, the stronger your timeline navigation abilities become. The second phase is quantum alignment, where you learn to match your personal frequency with the frequency of your desired timeline. This is where most people encounter resistance, because alignment requires releasing identity patterns that belong to your current timeline. Your current timeline self has specific thought patterns, emotional habits, and behavioral tendencies that keep you locked into this version of reality. To shift timelines, you must be willing to let those patterns dissolve and allow new patterns that match your desired timeline to emerge naturally. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to think positive thoughts or pretending to feel emotions you don't feel. It means creating space for your consciousness to naturally reorganize around the frequency patterns that exist in your desired timeline. The third phase is quantum anchoring, where you establish stable resonance with your new timeline until it becomes your primary reality. This is the most crucial phase because this is where most people's timeline shifts collapse back into their original reality. Timeline anchoring requires what I call sustained quantum coherence. You must maintain alignment with your new timeline frequency, even when external circumstances still reflect your old timeline. This isn't about willpower or positive thinking. This is about trusting the quantum mechanics of reality creation, even when your physical senses can't yet perceive the shift that's occurring. During the anchoring phase, you'll experience what quantum physicists call superposition bleeding, where experiences from your new timeline begin to leak into your current reality. You might have dreams that feel more real than your waking life. You might receive information or insights that seem to come from nowhere. You might find yourself knowing things about your future that you couldn't possibly know from your current timeline perspective. These aren't signs that you're losing touch with reality. These are signs that you're gaining access to quantum reality, where information moves freely between timelines and consciousness isn't limited by the linear time-space constraints of physical matter. Let me share something that will accelerate your timeline shifting process exponentially. There's a specific moment each day when the electromagnetic barriers between timelines are at their weakest. This occurs during what physicists call the Schumann resonance minimum, approximately 1 hour before sunrise in your local time zone. During this window, your consciousness is naturally more malleable, more capable of shifting between dimensional frequencies. If you practice timeline alignment during this period, you can accomplish in minutes what might otherwise take weeks of effort. Here's a simple but powerful practice for that sacred hour. Lie comfortably and allow your breathing to become slow and deep. Feel your consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of your physical body. Sense yourself existing as pure awareness, unlimited by the story of your current timeline. Timeline shifting represents just the beginning of what becomes possible when consciousness understands its role as reality's creative force. There's an entire quantum framework of 9 master frequencies that govern how awareness navigates between dimensions and ultimately transcends the need for shifting altogether. In my complete guide, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery, I reveal the step-by-step practices for moving from timeline selection to becoming the quantum field itself, transforming from seeking to being. It's linked in the pinned comment below for those ready to explore the complete system of conscious reality creation. From this expanded state, reach your consciousness toward the timeline where your deepest desire has already manifested. Don't try to visualize specific details. Instead, feel into the energetic signature of that reality. What does it feel like to exist in a timeline where everything you've ever wanted is simply the natural state of being? Allow that feeling to permeate every cell of your body. Let it rewrite your electromagnetic signature. Let it become more real than the timeline you've been experiencing. This isn't imagination. This is quantum calibration, where you're tuning your consciousness to receive a different broadcast from the infinite field of possibility. The more consistently you practice this calibration, the faster your external reality will begin to reflect your new timeline frequency. But remember, the external changes are always the last to appear. The quantum shifts happen first in consciousness, then in energy patterns, then in synchronicities and opportunities, and finally in physical manifestations. Trust the process, even when you can't see evidence yet. Timeline shifts often feel like nothing is happening right up until the moment everything changes. This is because the shift occurs at quantum levels that are invisible to ordinary perception until they reach critical mass and suddenly collapse into visible reality. What you're experiencing right now by receiving this transmission is not accidental. Your consciousness has achieved sufficient coherence to access timeline-shifting technologies because you've been prepared through every challenge, every spiritual practice, every moment of choosing growth over comfort. The struggles you've experienced in your current timeline weren't punishments or mistakes. They were training programs designed to develop the spiritual muscles necessary for navigating quantum realities. Every time you chose trust over fear, every time you maintained faith despite contrary evidence, every time you listened to your inner guidance rather than external opinions, you are building timeline navigation capabilities. You are ready now, ready to step through the quantum portal that's opening for you, ready to release the limited story of who you've been and embrace the unlimited truth of who you're becoming. Ready to discover that everything you've ever dreamed of exists right now in a parallel timeline that's just waiting for your consciousness to find it. But here's something crucial that will determine your success in this process. Timeline shifting isn't about escaping your current reality because you don't like it. It's about graduating from your current reality because you've learned everything it came to teach you. Approach timeline shifting from a place of gratitude for your current experience rather than resistance to it. Your current timeline has been the perfect classroom for developing the consciousness capable of accessing higher timelines. Honor what it's given you even as you prepare to transcend it. This gratitude creates what quantum physicists call constructive interference, where the frequencies of your current timeline harmonize with your desired timeline instead of creating quantum static that interferes with the shifting process. Timeline shifting is the natural evolution of consciousness. It's not a special ability reserved for advanced spiritual practitioners. It's the birthright of every human being who remembers that consciousness is the fundamental force of reality creation. As more people awaken to their timeline shifting capabilities, we're creating what scientists call a morphic field of quantum awareness. Each person who successfully shifts timelines makes it easier for others to access the same technologies. Your personal timeline shift contributes to a global consciousness evolution, where humanity collectively graduates from limitation-based realities into possibility-based realities. This is why your transformation matters beyond your individual desires. You're participating in the largest consciousness upgrade in human history. Take a moment now and comment below with one word that represents the timeline you're choosing to access. Let this word be your quantum signature, your energetic password to the reality where that frequency is your natural state of being. The technologies I'm sharing with you today represent just the beginning of what becomes possible when you understand consciousness as the fundamental creative force of reality. Beyond timeline shifting lies the mastery of what I call reality architecture, where consciousness learns to design entirely new realities rather than just choosing between existing timelines. In my comprehensive guide, Quantum Architecture, Designing Reality from Pure Consciousness, I reveal the advanced practices for moving beyond timeline selection into timeline creation itself. It's linked in the description below for those ready to explore the complete spectrum of consciousness technologies. But for now, focus on the timeline shift that's calling to you most powerfully. Feel into the reality where you naturally live as the fullest expression of your potential. Sense the electromagnetic signature of that timeline. Allow your consciousness to begin its migration toward that frequency. You are not bound by the story of your past. You are not limited by the circumstances of your present. You are an infinite being temporarily focused through the lens of human experience. And that lens is about to shift to reveal possibilities you couldn't even imagine from your previous perspective. The quantum field is responding to your readiness. The dimensional membranes are dissolving. The portal is open. All that remains is for you to make the conscious choice to step through. Subscribe to stay connected with this frequency of quantum awareness as we continue exploring the furthest reaches of what consciousness can accomplish when it remembers its true nature as the creative force of reality itself. The more of us who embody these quantum technologies, the more the collective field supports timeline shifting as a normal human capability rather than an extraordinary exception. We are the pioneers of consciousness evolution, the bridge between limitation and liberation, the living proof that reality is far more malleable than most people dare to believe. But let's go deeper into the actual mechanics of what happens during a timeline shift, because understanding the process removes the mystery and allows you to navigate it with confidence rather than confusion. When consciousness begins to disengage from one timeline and align with another, there's always a transition period that quantum physicists call dimensional flux. During this phase, your awareness exists partially in multiple timelines simultaneously, creating experiences that can feel disorienting if you don't understand what's happening. You might find yourself remembering events differently than you did before. You might discover that conversations you thought you had never actually occurred, or that problems you were certain existed seem to have resolved themselves without your intervention. You might wake up with knowledge or skills that you don't remember acquiring. These aren't signs of mental instability or memory problems. These are natural symptoms of consciousness transitioning between dimensional frequencies. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to match the neural patterns that exist in your new timeline. And this rewiring process creates temporary confusion as old patterns dissolve and new patterns establish themselves. I'm curious about your own experience with these quantum manifestations. In the comments below, share a moment when you felt reality shifting around you. Perhaps a synchronicity that seemed too perfect to be coincidence, or a breakthrough that happened just when you needed it most. These stories help us all recognize the quantum field at work in our lives. The key during dimensional flux is to remain centered in your sense of identity as infinite consciousness, rather than trying to maintain coherence with any particular set of memories or circumstances. You are not your history. You are not your story. You are the awareness within which all histories and stories arise and dissolve. From this centered awareness, you can observe the flux without being destabilized by it. Watch the changes in your memory and perception with curious detachment, knowing that these shifts are evidence of successful timeline migration rather than problems to be solved. Timeline shifting also affects your relationships in profound ways that most people don't anticipate. As you shift into a new timeline, you're not just changing your own reality. You're accessing versions of everyone in your life that exist in that timeline. The people you know and love don't disappear, but the versions of them that exist in your new timeline may be dramatically different from the versions you've been relating to in your current timeline. Someone who has been challenging or unsupportive in your current timeline might become encouraging and helpful in your new timeline. Someone who seemed incompatible with your dreams might suddenly become your greatest collaborator. This happens because every person exists in multiple timelines simultaneously, just as you do. When you shift timelines, you're essentially changing which version of each person you're interacting with. The core essence remains the same, but the personality patterns, belief systems, and behavioral tendencies can be completely different. This is why timeline shifting often feels like magic to people experiencing it for the first time. Relationships that seemed irreparably damaged suddenly heal. Opportunities that were impossible in your previous timeline become obvious and available. Resources that were scarce become abundant. But remember, you're not changing other people. You're accessing versions of them that already exist in the timeline you're shifting into. This means that everyone you encounter in your new timeline is already aligned with your highest good, already capable of supporting your dreams, already operating from the frequencies that make your desired reality possible. Understanding this removes the need to convince anyone of anything or to wait for others to change before your reality can improve. The versions of everyone that support your highest timeline already exist. Timeline shifting is simply the process of aligning with the reality where those versions are the ones you interact with. Here's a practice that will help you maintain stability during the transition process. Each morning, before engaging with the world, spend a few minutes consciously choosing which version of each important person in your life you want to interact with that day. This isn't about controlling or manipulating others. This is about consciously selecting which timeline version of your relationships you want to activate through your attention and expectation. Feel into the energy of each person operating from their highest potential, already aligned with your mutual good, already expressing their most loving and supportive qualities. As you hold this intention, you're literally tuning your consciousness to the timeline where these optimal versions are the reality you experience. The more consistently you practice this conscious selection, the more stable your new timeline becomes. One of the most powerful aspects of timeline shifting is its effect on what you might call your soul mission or life purpose. In your current timeline, you may have felt unclear about your deeper calling, or frustrated by barriers that prevented you from expressing your gifts fully. Timeline shifting allows you to access realities where your soul's purpose is not only clear, but actively supported by every aspect of your environment. You shift into timelines where your unique contributions are needed and valued, where the resources for expressing your gifts flow naturally, where your work feels like play because you're operating in perfect alignment with your essential nature. This doesn't mean you'll necessarily change careers or abandon everything you've built in your current timeline. It means you'll discover ways to express your authentic self within whatever structure serves your highest good, whether that's transforming your existing situation or gracefully transitioning into something completely new. The key is trusting that your soul knows which timeline supports its fullest expression and allowing that wisdom to guide your choices rather than trying to figure everything out mentally. Your mind knows only the possibilities available within your current timeline. Your soul knows the infinite possibilities available across all timelines. As you practice timeline alignment, pay attention to sudden inspirations, unexpected invitations, or opportunities that seem to appear from nowhere. These are often signals from your soul that you're accessing timeline frequencies where your purpose can express more fully. Follow these inspirations even when they don't make logical sense from your current timeline perspective. Logic is a limited tool that operates within the constraints of known possibilities. Timeline shifting requires what I call quantum intuition, which can perceive possibilities that don't yet exist in your current reality, but are perfectly natural in the timeline you're moving toward. Let me address something that creates confusion for many people attempting timeline shifts: the relationship between free will and timeline selection. If every possible timeline already exists, do your choices actually matter? Or are you simply discovering predetermined realities? This question misunderstands the nature of consciousness and choice at the quantum level. Every timeline exists as potential, but consciousness brings specific timelines into actuality through the choices it makes. Your free will doesn't create timelines, but it absolutely determines which timeline becomes your lived experience. Think of it like choosing a radio station. All the radio stations exist simultaneously, broadcasting their signals through the same airspace. Your radio doesn't create the music, but your choice of which frequency to tune into determines which music you actually hear. Similarly, all possible timelines exist simultaneously in the quantum field, but your consciousness choices determine which timeline frequency you tune into, and therefore which reality you actually experience. Your free will is the tuning mechanism that selects your experience from infinite possibilities. This understanding is liberating because it means you're never trapped in any particular reality. No matter how limited your current circumstances appear, there's always a timeline available where those limitations don't exist. Your power lies in learning to tune your consciousness to the frequency of the timeline you prefer. But here's where many people misunderstand timeline shifting as spiritual bypassing or denial of current reality challenges. True timeline shifting doesn't ignore problems or pretend difficulties don't exist. It recognizes that problems and difficulties are features of specific timelines, not absolute realities. Instead of trying to solve problems within a problematic timeline, timeline shifting moves you into a timeline where those problems simply aren't part of the reality structure. This isn't avoidance. This is efficiency. Why struggle to fix what's broken when you can step into a reality where it was never broken? This requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to challenges. Instead of asking, "How do I solve this problem?" you ask, "What timeline am I in where this problem exists? And how do I shift into a timeline where it doesn't?" This doesn't mean you become passive or irresponsible about your current circumstances. It means you handle current challenges from the perspective of someone who already knows they're transitioning into a timeline where such challenges are unnecessary. You take inspired action when it feels aligned, but you don't attach your timeline shift to the success of those actions. You handle responsibilities with presence and care, but you don't identify with the limitations that created those responsibilities. You remain engaged with your current reality while maintaining primary allegiance to the timeline you're moving toward. As we approach the completion of this transmission, I want to address the most crucial element of successful timeline shifting: the role of what quantum physicists call observer collapse and what spiritual traditions call witnessing consciousness. Timeline shifting ultimately depends on your ability to maintain awareness of yourself as the consciousness that chooses which timeline to observe, rather than identifying with any particular timeline content. When you identify with the story of your current timeline, you become locked into its frequency through emotional attachment and mental fixation. But when you recognize yourself as the pure awareness that can choose which story to observe, You gain the freedom to shift between timeline frequencies based on your preferences rather than your conditioning. This is the deepest secret of timeline mastery. You are not a character in any timeline story. You are the consciousness that chooses which story to participate in. From this recognition, timeline shifting becomes as natural as changing channels on a television. Consider watching this transmission again tomorrow morning to reinforce these quantum patterns in your consciousness. Each viewing deepens the neural pathways that support your new reality. And if someone in your life is ready to understand how consciousness shapes reality, sharing this video creates an energetic ripple effect that accelerates manifestation for both of you by expanding the collective field of conscious awareness. You don't have to struggle to leave your current timeline or work hard to access your desired timeline. You simply withdraw your identification from one frequency and place your attention on another. The shift happens automatically because consciousness always experiences whatever it observes most consistently. Take a moment now to feel into this truth. You are the consciousness that exists before, during, and after any timeline experience. You are the awareness within which all timelines arise and dissolve. You are the chooser, not the chosen. You are the observer, not the observed. From this place of sovereign awareness, comment below with one word that represents your commitment to conscious timeline selection. Let this word anchor your identity as a quantum navigator rather than a timeline victim. The portal between dimensions is open now. The frequency barriers are at their minimum. Your consciousness has been prepared through every experience that brought you to this moment of recognition. You are ready to step through, ready to discover the timeline where your dreams aren't dreams, but simply the natural order of your reality. Ready to experience yourself as the unlimited being you've always been, temporarily focused through the lens of expanded possibility. Subscribe to stay connected to this frequency of quantum mastery as we continue exploring the infinite possibilities available to consciousness that remembers its true nature as the creative force of reality itself. The collective timeline shift is accelerating. Each person who successfully navigates quantum realities contributes to the morphic field that makes timeline shifting accessible to others. Your personal transformation becomes a gift to the global consciousness evolution. You are not just changing your own life. You are helping to change what's possible for humanity itself. You are a pioneer of consciousness, a quantum navigator, a living bridge between limitation and liberation. The future you've been dreaming of exists right now in a parallel timeline. Your job isn't to create it or earn it or wait for it. Your job is simply to tune your consciousness to its frequency and allow yourself to step through the dimensional doorway that's opening for you in this very moment. Trust the process. Trust your readiness. Trust the quantum field that's been orchestrating this exact moment of possibility since the moment you first dared to dream of something greater than your current circumstances. You are about to cross into a new timeline. The only question is whether you're ready to let go of who you've been to become who you truly are. The portal is open. The invitation is extended. The choice, as always, is yours. Welcome to the other side of impossible. Welcome to the timeline where miracles are normal and limitations are optional. Welcome to the quantum reality where consciousness creates rather than reacts, where being creates rather than doing, where alignment creates rather than effort. This is not the end of your journey. This is the beginning of your journey as a conscious reality creator, a quantum navigator, a being who knows that every dream exists somewhere in the infinite field of possibility, waiting for consciousness brave enough to claim it. The transformation has already begun. You are already shifting. You are already free. Everything else is just the timeline catching up to the truth of who you really are. Until we meet again in the space where all possibilities converge, remember this: you are infinite consciousness having a temporary human experience, and that experience is about to become far more extraordinary than you ever dared to imagine. The best is not coming. The best is here now, waiting for you to tune into its frequency and claim it as your reality. Everything you've ever wanted exists right now. The only distance between you and your dreams is frequency. And frequency can be changed in an instant through the power of conscious choice. You have that power now. You've always had that power. The only thing that changes is your willingness to use it. Step through the portal. Cross into your new timeline. Become who you came here to be. The quantum field is waiting for your decision. Understanding how quantum jumps actually occur reveals why your timeline shift is inevitable rather than hopeful. When consciousness reaches the coherence levels you've developed, quantum leaps become the natural next step in your evolution. This transmission in "If you're seeing this, your quantum jump is about to happen" explores the precise mechanics of consciousness phase transitions and why your breakthrough is closer than your next breath.